This knowledge that everything is actually an internal process, that everything is the result of an internal process, is quite different from how most of us have grown up thinking and believing. So, unless you're quite extraordinary in that regard, then it might be somewhat shocking, actually. So, I would suggest that you don't try to fit this into what you already know. Because that's a mistake that oftentimes we make, is we try to fit something that's actually really new and radical into what it is that we already think we know. And then even if we get something valuable from that, it's just a triviality compared to the real richness that's actually available to us. Whereas if you're willing to just set aside everything that you think you know and actually receive the fullness of what it is that's available, then you can receive the totality of that rather than just some tiny little fraction. So consider the possibility that this is really a radical new message, even if you think you already know it. Consider then, start with something that you're unhappy with in your experience. Just bring to mind something that you're unhappy with in your experience. So, whatever that may be, anything. So, really, anything at all. So, it could be like a habitual, compulsive behavior that you wish you didn't do, but you haven't been able to stop. Or it could be some kind of repetitive way of thinking that you haven't been able to stop yet. Or it could be some kind of irritation that you experience repeatedly in response to certain situations or people. Or it could be some kind of goal that you have been trying to achieve without success. Could be anything. So I don't want to limit you in any way. Just whatever, something in your life that you're unhappy with. Now, notice that you've had some kind of story about this. You've had some kind of story about it. Maybe you haven't brought a lot of awareness to the story that you tell yourself, and maybe you have. Maybe you have a lot of familiarity with the story that you tell yourself about it. Maybe you're so familiar with it because you even tell other people about it. Sometimes it's like that, right? Sometimes we not only tell ourselves the story, but we tell other people the story. And sometimes we kind of keep it very close to the vest. We don't tell other people. In fact, we sometimes don't even tell ourselves what we're telling ourselves. So it's kind of a little bit secret from us. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that there is some kind of story that you tell yourself about it. So what do I mean by a story? What I mean is that you tell yourself that, well, first of all, you can say something about it, right? So whatever you say about it is a story. So you say, well, this is the name of this feeling. This is the name of this situation. This is what it's called. I feel this way when these things happen as a result of this. So that's all a story. So just notice the story that you tell yourself about it. Now, just that story itself is a process. The story that you tell yourself is a process. That's part of the process that you use in order to create that experience. I mean, notice that as long as you tell yourself the same story, you pretty much have the same experience, more or less. I mean, I'll give you an example. Like I thought I had this big problem with the sounds. It's just some sounds. I just wanted to crawl out of my skin. It was just like I'm desperate to find some way to avoid those sounds. I felt so terrible. I didn't want those sounds. There's a lot of different sounds, a lot of different sounds. So I had a story that it was, sounds were causing me pain. Sounds caused me problems. So long as I had that story, I kept having the same problem. So that was part of a process. This is part of the process. Is the story is going to keep that, it provides a structure for that process. So just notice that when you have a story, it limits the way you think about it. So in that scenario, when I thought these sounds are problems for me, then that limited the way that I was able to, in those moments, think about my actual experience. So I was not noticing everything that was outside of the structure of that story. So if it didn't fit into that narrative of sounds or problems for me, then I couldn't think about it. I couldn't see it. I couldn't understand it. It didn't in any way enter into my reality. And yet, actually, there's an enormous reality outside of the one that I was living in. And the answers for my problem were where I was not looking. They were outside of the story. Because I exhausted that story. I had tried and tried and tried and tried and tried to find answers within that story. And lo and behold, they just were not to be found. So the story is part of the process